Amadeus makes the experience of travel better for everyone everywhere by inspiring innovation, partnerships, and responsibility to people, places, and planet. Our technology powers the travel and tourism industry, inspiring more open ways of working, more connected ways of thinking, centered around the traveler. Our open platform connects the global travel and hospitality ecosystem, from startups to big industry players and governments too. Together, redesigning the travel of tomorrow. Amadeus, it's how travel works. Visit us to know more, amadeus.com.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Skift India Travel Podcast. I'm your host Peden Doma Bhutia, and in today's episode I have with me my colleague from Skift Research, Varsha Arora. Varsha is a research manager at Skift, and together we will be exploring a range of topics from the changing visa landscape for Indian travelers to capacity additions by major airlines and a proposed tourist tax in Darjeeling. Welcome, Varsha.
Thank you, Peden. Thank you for having me.
Varsha, I'd like to focus on visa trends and the increasing mobility of Indian travelers at first. In recent news, countries like Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Malaysia have opened their doors with visa-free entry for Indian passport holders. Vietnam is also likely to introduce something similar. So this has resulted in a significant surge in travel interest, and then there are, surveys saying that there's been a 28% rise in searches for trips to Thailand after the visa-free announcement. Now, the good news is also that India has seen positive movement in the Henley Passport Index, climbing about 7 places to the 80th rank. This improvement in mobility score and passport power rank is also complemented by the acceptance of UPI payments in various countries, which has made outbound travel even more attractive for Indian tourists. Isn't it?
Right. That's a good note to start on. I mean, it's just a very positive, sort of a very optimistic trend that we are seeing. To start with, I would say that first of all, in 2022, India was the biggest outbound market in Asia. So now that in itself says something, right? I mean, India had already surpassed South Korea, Japan, and China. So, which is a big deal, right? Now, there are
Yeah,
two
and
things.
Varsha, one more point. I'd like to make one more point that, earlier this year, as part of the Skift megatrends, Skift had predicted that, India would be the new China in the reordering of travel in Asia. So we kind of feel vindicated to that point as well.
True. I mean, see, China saw a very slow sort of recovery. If we can refer to the numbers from the Skift Travel Health Index, which is our proprietary tool. We sort of track the recovery, and by next year we'll be doing a year-on-year benchmarking on as to how the travel industry is moving. So if you look at the numbers there, India recovered much faster than China. And although it's only this year that we have crossed the 2019 numbers, but in 2022 already India had a higher share in the outbound market as compared to China. And then if you're referring to the mega trend that we published earlier this year, I would also mention about the demographic dividend that I think we've already covered in one of the podcast episodes. But the point being that all the factors point towards India becoming, a major travel outbound market as compared to China. And that is what you can see in the visa trends as well. I mean, all these countries are opening up to India because they are wanting India to become, one of their major source markets. Because, I mean, we've been reading about it, how destination management organizations are working towards sort of flinching away from the Chinese travelers and, just reducing their dependency on China. So, and that is very well evident in how the visa rules are being changed for Indian travelers. And also, if you look at not only the Henley Passport Index that you mentioned, of course, I mean, that's one benchmark that we follow. And the ranks haven't been linear, so to say, on the Henley Passport Index for the Indian passport. It's been moving up and down, but now it's at rank 80th as compared to 87 last year, which is a big jump. And also, if you refer to the mobility score, now what mobility score is, I mean, a lot of our you know audience would already know about it, but just to mention, I mean, mobility score basically defines how many countries are actually accessible on that particular passport. And if I talk about the score for India, it has moved up from 48 in 2015 to 77 in 2023. Again, like a big jump. So, I mean, just to sort of summarize that, yes, we are seeing positive changes in visa policies and global rankings with respect to the Indian passport, which is very well shown in the growing outbound travel market numbers and the kind of destinations that Indians are wanting to travel to. Now, I mean, we have written about this. Dubai, US, Thailand, Saudi, and Singapore are the top destinations on the Indian traveler's mind. And since I mentioned US here, we are talking about visa access becoming easy for Indians. But since US is on the top of the list with respect to
Correct.
destinations, let me just
Absolutely.
mention about the challenges that we've been facing. And I mean, Skift has been very vocal about it as a company also.
Yes,
Um,
in fact, if I check today, if I checked today, and there is still a wait time of more than 500 days, for a US tourist visa. So, and this is
exactly.
despite the fact that India is the second largest non-North American market for the US.
Yes.
There is
And,
still a challenge.
right, true. I mean, it is the biggest outbound source market. And still, there are being issues. There are 500 days of wait time, which is a lot. And in fact, even this year, despite of the challenges in the first 6 months, we Indians were on the top of the ranks with respect to the inbound source market. So I mean, and also just to put it in cost perspective, how much will this wait time cost the economy, the American economy? The US Travel Association, it forecasted that these delays will cost around $12 billion in lost traveler spending this year. So, I mean, just to give a perspective of how much money is on the table when you when you talk about the US visa challenges for India.
Uh, Absolutely. And Varsha, like you mentioned, in spite of the fact that whatever the challenges might be, the demand for US visas from India has reached, record highs. And, I think almost about 800,000 Indian travelers visited the US in the first 6 months of 2023. So that's
Right.
a huge jump, and we can only hope and pray that this situation is corrected soon enough. Moving on from visa, I wanted to talk to you about this exciting development that's happening in the India market about capacity additions by major airlines. Indigo, of course, and Air India are leading the way with strategic expansions to meet the demands of Indian travelers. And another good news that we covered recently was the fact that Indigo is set to be the first airline partner for India's new the Noida International Airport, the second airport at Delhi, when it begins its first phase of operations probably by the end of next year. So, with this, of course, Indigo will be enhancing the air connectivity in Uttar Pradesh and surrounding regions, addressing the growing travel needs of these areas as well. And then, of course, Air India is making significant strides by introducing these non-stop services to Phuket in Thailand, Melbourne in Australia. And it has about, I think, Air India would be having about more than 400 weekly flights added until March 2024, right? And then there is the connectivity to Europe and United States as well, providing more options for travelers.
Right. Okay, so my sort of insight here would be two-pronged. One, so see, if you look at it from a bird's eye view, Indigo is sort of going deeper into the domestic market and is also forming codeshares with Turkish to have access to the European market. That's how I see the Indigo expansion to
Yes,
be. And
but also it's interesting, Varsha, that Indigo has also developed connectivity. Is also looking at international in a big
yes,
way. Ever
yes,
since Peter Elbers has joined at the
yeah.
helm, I see that Indigo has more international ambitions as well.
True. I mean, you can see it in the fleet orders. I mean, they already have 500 orders for Airbus 320s, but along with that, they're also considering Boeing's. So, which just reflects how their network is going to develop, and there will be an increased focus on international for sure. Um, Having said that, Air India, who already has the fleet available, and the fleet is very flexible with respect to international and domestic. I mean, they can just swap it any which way they want. Now, if you look at the kind of routes they are wanting to start, it again reflects, the destination choices for India, for Indians. I mean, so I mean, they are starting, most of the new flights are starting, it comes in the mid haul section. You talk about Dhaka, you talk about Phuket, so that's the mid haul. And in the long haul, they are sort of targeting US again. They are starting a new flight to New York.
Mhm.
There is Melbourne again, like a big VFR market for the Indian community.
Mhm.
So the expansion very well shows where the Indians are planning to sort of travel in the future. And just to back it up, Skift Research did a survey of the Indian market in August 2023. Again, like if I talk about the figures from that particular survey, there are 54% of people who are wanting to travel long haul next year versus 39% who are wanting to travel mid haul. When I talk about international, of course.
Mhm.
Now, these numbers obviously now having the recent visa access changes, these numbers would have already improved for mid haul, I'm sure. But the point being that that's the kind of split. I mean, it'll be sort of a 50-50 share between mid haul and long haul when it comes to international travel, right? And
Mhm.
Australia, Canada, and US being the top three destinations for Indians as per the Skift Research survey.
Mhm.
So,
Also, Fasha, what's interesting is that what you've mentioned about Air India and Indigo. Let's also we should also turn our attention towards Akasa, which is a very new
yes.
airline, but Akasa has also got permission to fly international. So it's also
Right.
looking at the short to medium haul markets.
Mm-hmm. Yes, true. I mean, Akasa recently, not, I mean, obviously Port Blair doesn't come as a mid-haul section, but they are trying to go international as well, which basically is gonna be very well suited for the mid-haul fancy that Indians have for next year. I mean,
Mhm.
around 40% of them are wanting to travel mid-haul, and if you talk about mid-haul, we currently have Indigo dominating in terms of fares. If I talk about the price sensitivity of Indigo of the Indian people, I would say Indigo is their first preference. Now, with Akasa coming in, it will be a super competitive environment to be in, which obviously is a win-win for the customers. So, and since
Correct,
I
and
am
I
bringing up
probably that will also see the fares come down a little. I mean,
exactly,
I'm
yes,
just hoping because right now, yes, the fares are a bit
yeah.
on the higher side, so probably that will see the fares coming down a little.
True. I mean, just to tie it up, I mean, we spoke about fares going down, and we also initially spoke about how visa regulations are being eased now. Now, just to bring a very interesting observation from the India survey, there were around 13% people who said that they're not planning to travel next year because of the prices of flights, while there were 22% of people who did not want to travel next year because of visa issues or because of some passport issue in slash updation issue. So we're talking about approximately 40% in total. Now, when you bring in the capacity, which Air India and Indigo and Akasa, or for that matter, all airlines in India are wanting to do, along with the visa processes being, getting easier, Indian passport rank improving, it all sort of boils down to the point that these concerns of the customers will be resolved, and the outbound market, I mean, India is already on its peak, and all the projections give a very positive view on how it's going to be growing in the next few decades. But these issues are, you can already see them being worked on, right, with the capacity addition and the visa processes. So yeah, I mean,
yeah, I mean, and of course, we know that there is a rising middle class coming up in India,
yes,
and everybody wants to, with disposable income, and their first priority is travel. And then, of course, there is also the the options such as flexible financing, like travel now, pay later. Last week, I had Sam Cash at the podcast, and they spoke about how more and more Indians are, traveling, upgrading the destination, upgrading the way in which they travel through these travel now, pay later options as well.
true. And also, I mean, just to mention, from the airline strategy point of view, they like what Air India, what Air Indigo are wanting to do is sort of a first mover advantage. I mean, the kind of demand that we are seeing, if the Indian carriers do not fill in the gap, there will be international carriers coming in, right? I mean, Sri Lankan already is sort of, routing a lot of traffic via India. So, I mean, you can see, and then there was Mantire who started, uh, uh, services
Yes,
between Bombay and Maldives recently.
Maldives. Yes,
So the point being that it's actually very crucial that this capacity gets added, and for Air India and Indigo to move fast on this, because if not them, there will be some carrier filling in this gap. Because I mean, we are not talking about a new topic. Everyone knows that the India travel market is going to be just booming in the coming decade. So I
correct.
mean, obviously, everyone would want to have a piece of it. So first move,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just the first mover advantage that these carriers should sort of focus on.
Amadeus makes the experience of travel better for everyone everywhere by inspiring innovation, partnerships, and responsibility to people, places, and planet. Our technology powers the travel and tourism industry, inspiring more open ways of working, more connected ways of thinking, centered around the traveler. Our open platform connects the global travel and hospitality ecosystem, from startups to big industry players and governments too. Together, redesigning the travel of tomorrow. Amadeus, it's how travel works. Visit us to know more, amadeus.com.
Correct. We've spoken a lot about outbound travel, Varsha. I wanted to speak a little bit about domestic as well, because domestic travel is huge in India. And there is this issue of proposed tourism tax brewing in the small hill station of Darjeeling. The funny thing is that it's just that the Darjeeling municipality is considering levying a daily tourism tax of 20 rupees, which is about 25 cents per visitor above the age of 5. Okay. But there is a lot of opposition that the plan is facing from local hoteliers, because they cite concerns about past failures and tax collection. And there are worries about the lack of proper processes in place. But every time any destination decides to impose something called a tourism tax, I know that it's met with a lot of resistance as well. But that destinations also say that this is more to more a step towards sustainability, to prevent overcrowding. But a tax of 20 rupees is definitely not something that whereas we have destinations like Bhutan with like $250 tax, tourism tax. What do you make of these tourism taxes, and especially in a country like India where overcrowding could be a problem? I mean, like I've seen I come from Darjeeling, and I know that I've seen how there's been a surge in tourism traffic post COVID in Darjeeling, and for the first time in my life, I've experienced traffic jams in Darjeeling, which was not there at all. And this is all due to this tourism influx that the small hill station is witnessing, and there is no infrastructure to match those tourism numbers.
Right. How I see it is that it's not an issue with the propensity to pay or for the travelers to pay that amount for sure. I mean, and we have data to back up. I'll just talk about it in a bit. But I think the problem is with the implementation part of it. Now, for example, you mentioned the Darjeeling tax, right? It's not the first time it's being done. It's already been, it's like 3 times that the state government has tried to levy that tax. All the 3 times it just faded off and it never took shape, right? Why is that issue? Because, and even this time, if you see, the resistance is from the hotelier side. Now their
Correct.
point is that we don't want to take the onus of charging this amount from our customers, which is okay. I mean, the processes can be talked about, but the way it's being implemented is just not correct, and we know that. I mean, uh, it's not a hotelier's sort of prerogative to do that. Instead, how it happens in Bhutan, for example, is that at the entry point of the country, or at the entry point, the customers or the travelers are charged with a certain amount, and that's how it should be. Now, so that's basically putting the onus on the wrong stakeholder, right? And then also, if you look into this problem, they had sort of given a tender to an ex third party to collect these taxes. Now, I mean, you can already figure out how flawed that process would be, right? um, and and so yeah, I mean, so that's the supply part of it, right? We aren't being able to give those sustainable travel choices to the travelers. So that's, I mean, how I see it is the issue is on the supply side and not on the demand side. As far as the demand is concerned, I mean, we did a India survey last year, and we also did a business traveler survey focused on India last year. And I have some stats from that which says that 90% of people actually believe that their companies are ready to pay extra, certain amount extra to pay for a sustainable travel choice. So okay, I know the critics would say that there is a big say do gap. People say that they're going to pay, but they don't pay. But if the number is at 90%, and even if we cut it off by half, I would say 50% of people are still wanting to pay that little extra for sustainability. So yeah, I mean, just to sort of conclude, I mean, the problem is with the implementation of these taxes and addressing these issues rather than the amount that is charged or people's willingness to pay.
Yeah, and I think we should also acknowledge that over tourism is a concern in India, because that's why the Ministry of Tourism is trying to develop more tourism destinations, because they want to split the traffic. Because whenever it's summers, you can see there's always these pictures that go viral of these long trail of cars extending to Shimla and to other hill stations. So over tourism is definitely a problem in India.
No, definitely. And even like, I mean, if you read about this Darjeeling case, the locals there are totally supporting this move, and they want this tax to be this charge to be implemented as well. So I mean, from a local's perspective, and as you also mentioned, I'm being from Darjeeling, you know how things have changed over time, and
Correct.
definitely overcrowding is an issue here. I mean, one is
Yeah,
that
I
India's
mean, like,
population is increasing already, so we have a lot of
exactly.
people, and now you add the tourists to it, so it's a lot of
and then
people.
and then and then there is this propensity to travel as well, right? I mean, like, people do
Exactly.
not want to sit, be it a long weekend or anything. People are just out and about. I mean, like,
Hmm.
they're not just sitting at homes or just going to the nearby mall. What they want to do is travel.
Yes, yes, true. The easy access to travel, all what we spoke about, right? The capacity addition,
Mhm.
India, middle class
Mhm.
growing, it's all obviously linked and is just going to increase the numbers, and which will be causing the issue of overcrowding at some point, if not right now. So,
That's great, Varsha. Thank you so much for this discussion. It was really nice to discuss, the headlines that we've been reading about for the past few weeks. And thank you so much for coming online and talking to us.
thank you so much, Piran. Thank you for having me.
Okay. And that wraps up today's episode. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the latest trends and challenges shaping the travel landscape in India. Do join us next time as we continue to explore the ever evolving world of travel and tourism. Thank you.
This has been the Skift India Travel Podcast. Thank you for listening.